I spent about 4 hours today out at the Chancellorsville National Battlefield. Um, didn't take as many pictures today as I did at some of the other battlefields, but I mean, just look at this. This is what most of Chancellorsville looks like. Very thick copses of trees. That's where a lot of the fighting happened. Well, actually, a lot of the fighting happened along the various roads and paths, and that would spill out into those tree areas around those paths. Makes for not the most photogenic places in terms of, oh, you can see this spot where this happened kind of stuff. There are 3 days that make up the real big portion of the Chancellorsville battle. The first day is more or less the meeting engagement as Lee's lead forces are moving to intercept Hooker's forces, and they run at each other east of Chancellorsville. In the end, Hooker pulls his troops back into kind of a defensive perimeter around Chancellorsville. The second day is mostly heavy skirmishing along the east part of the battlefield, where the Confederates are trying to keep the Union attention there while they secretly marched Jackson's corps all the way around to the west side of the battlefield, where late in the day his corps falls in on the open flank of the Union Army, crushes the 11th Corps, and causes a lot of problems. Of course, in the confusion as the night falls and Jackson scouts out ahead as he's coming back to his lines, there's a friendly fire incident in which he's mortally wounded. The third day is basically a general infantry assault by the Confederates, basically crashing all sides of Hooker's defenses around Chancellorsville until they collapse under the pressure, and they fall back to the north of Chancellorsville where they form another defensive line. These pictures you're seeing here now are one of the few parts of the battlefield that really are kind of open and you can see. There's also one of the few places where battle happened really all 3 days. This opening view you see here is looking west. It was originally held by the Union, but Hooker pulled them back to the far side of the field where you're looking. Later in the day, McLaws' division from the Confederates came up in this position. He then tried to push across the field and found out with a lot of heavy fire that there were Union troops and artillery over in those trees. The second day of the battle, this is where a lot of that heavy skirmishing occurred as McLaws tried to keep the Union attention here on this part of the field. So you have a lot of skirmish work, a lot of looking like you're going to attack, but not any real full-out attack. Then on the third day of the battle, you actually have, part of the general assault is McLaws' division sweeping across this field and smashing into the Union side over there. What you can see here, as I walked across the field, I made a point to kind of take some pictures around so you could see just how hilly and what the terrain looks like. That first picture looked kind of flat. And then finally there's this picture from over here on the Union side showing the view to the east that the Union would have seen. So if you can imagine seeing several thousand Confederate soldiers with their arms and everything coming out of that space and trying to crawl across that field, what that would have looked like. All that's left of the Chancellor's home is this foundation, and here we're taking a view towards the southeast. You can see the intersection where back then those 5 roads came together. There actually are 5 roads still, but the one's kind of not visible in this picture. It's those 5 roads coming together that made this place important. And as you can see from these other pictures, you can just see there's kind of, it's the open space around here that made this the kind of core of the defensive position they built around this space. Now here we are out at the western end of the battlefield. Again, we've got one of those open spaces amongst all those thick trees. We're looking south here, and there's a road up there near the tree line, and that's where the 11th Corps was set up, pretty much facing south along that tree. That's where, if any Confederates showed up, they were expecting them to come from the south. Unfortunately, the Confederates, Jackson's Corps, was already to their right off to the west and lining up, and not too long before sunset, they came over this hill, in effect, and crashed into the edge of the 11th Corps, the worst possible way to have hit them, and basically sent them running. I mean, there were individual groups that tried to hold out, but you can see here looking east, it's kind of open ground, and they would have pushed back through all that into those trees. Once nighttime fell and the Confederate attack kind of lost some of its steam, Jackson bought up a fresh division and went out to scout ahead. And it was, when scouting out ahead, he came back down this path and was mistaken for Union scouts and was fired upon by his own people. He was mortally wounded, and I mean, he would not die for probably, I think it was 9 days, but this would remove from Lee probably one of his most effective lieutenants. This is a view northeast from Hazel Grove. The ridge line in the distance is about 1,200 yards away. Another 1,000 or 1,200 yards past that would be where the Chancellor House is. It does give an idea just how close everything is in a Civil War battle. For the first 2 days, the Union held Hazel Grove, and it had a lot of artillery parked up here. At the end of the second day, after the flank collapsed, Hooker decided to pull the troops back from this space because it was kind of a space sticking out from the line. Was probably worried about them getting cut off. The result is during that third day general assault, there would be a ton of fighting in this space you see along here. You can't see it in the first picture, but there are Union artillery out there on that ridge line. So for several hours, you would have had an artillery duel going back and forth. You would have had thousands of infantry moving back and forth through these spaces. I mean, and the sign here, well, just, the words on that sign here about, the woods on fire, that's going to be the scariest thing. If you're wounded and laying in the woods and you smell the smoke of the wood burning, I mean, what if you can't get yourself out of the way? So, and, another picture just to be a reminder of just, as soon as you're off that cleared path, that road, this is what you're fighting in, this kind of close trees, just no way to really command your troops. It's everybody for themselves kind of thing. So here I am now at that far ridge line. It's a place called Fairview. Looking back towards this Hazel Grove, you can see the Confederate artillery there. So like I said, there was a artillery duel going on between these two spots, but the Confederates were attacking on basically all sides of the Union Army at this point. There is a point where an artillery shell actually hits the Chancellor House, and the fragments knock Hooker kind of senseless. And so at a key moment, the Union commander is kind of knocked senseless and not able to command, and there's not a clear person to stand up and take orders. So as you're getting pressed on all sides and ammunition starts running low, well, the line starts getting pushed back, and essentially this area and the Chancellor House area will get overrun. The Union will pull back and form a new defensive line north of this space, and then in the coming days there would be some rain, and they would use the cover of the rain to cross back across the river, and that would be the end of the Chancellorsville campaign.